will fight to the end. Doesn't matter what the world brings against me.
Well, good afternoon, and welcome to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase, our weekly call-in town hall and radio show. And boy, is it good to be back. I missed you all last week. I was fighting bronchitis, and I'm unable to do the live show, so I apologize for that. You had to listen to a rerun, but we're back today and still recovering, but at least I have a voice, so that's always a positive. At least most people think so, hopefully. My husband might disagree. Anyway, I would also like to thank WNTW 820 AM The Answer for the opportunity to provide this public service to you each week. I'm Senator Amanda Chase, your weekly radio show host, and I serve you all in the State Senate in the 11th Senatorial District, which includes Amelia, Colonial Heights, and most of Chesterfield. My office is in Richmond, not D.C., by the way, where I typically meet with constituents in our district office Tuesday and Thursday while we're out of session. And in session, I'm in my office 5 days a week. And by the way, I know I mentioned this last week, but we're currently in the process of moving from the General Assembly building. That's the office complex where all the legislators have their office. It's up the hill from the Capitol, and we are in the process of moving down the hill to the Pocahontas building and across from the state capitol. It's filled with asbestos and mold, which is probably why I'm hacking my head off right now. It's not a recipe for good health. So personally, even though I'm not one who gets sick, I've been fighting these upper respiratory issues since January and have bronchitis right now. So I'm looking forward to a healthy building. My office is currently packed up and in boxes, and I want to thank my aide, Julianne, for packing all those boxes while I was sick and getting ready to be moved out any day now. Any day. So anyway, once the move is over, you guys are going to have to come check out our new space in our old building. It's an old building. It's new space to us, but old building. You know how that goes. But we're being resourceful and being good stewards of our buildings. Thankfully, we still have the radio show, and we'll continue to take your calls on the air through the move. So let me give you the number today in case you want to call in. It's 804-454-1366. And many of you who have tuned in before know that the topics that we address on the show are issues that our constituents have brought to my attention. There are also bills that have come up during the General Assembly that I want to get your opinion on, see if you see what you have to say. If you have a question about today's topic, again, I invite you to call in, 804-454-1366, and we're going to do our best to answer your question on the show. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be talking about legislative recap again. We're going to talk about adoption and some other legislation with my seatmate, Senator David Suetterlein. And he's my seatmate on the floor of the Senate, which is he's in Senate District 19. He serves Salem, Bedford, Carroll County, Floyd, Franklin, Montgomery, Roanoke, and Wythe counties in the Senate. Now, Dave is currently a real estate agent, and prior to his own election, David served in Southwest Virginia as Senator Ralph Reed's legislative director for 8 years. So he's got a lot of experience on the legislative side before he became a state senator, which has served him very well. And in November 2015, David carried all 8 localities. He won 65% of the vote in a 3-way race. David and his wife Ashley live in Roanoke County, where their young son and daughter will be enrolled in the public schools for the next 17 years. He also grew up in a military family, as his father served in the Air Force and his mother taught at public schools. David graduated with high honors from Grove City College after graduating from Virginia Public Schools. And one thing that I love about Dave is his faith, and his faith, and that faith and the faith in the service that it compels are important to David and Ashley. They attend Fellowship Community Church, and David volunteers with a youth ministry at the Rescue Mission in Roanoke. In the Senate, David serves on the Agriculture, Conservation and Natural Resources Committee, the Education and Health Committee, where we serve together. He sits right beside me. And in the General Laws and Technology Committee, and finally Transportation Committee, where we also serve. He's a Republican, first-term, second-year state senator like myself. Senator Suetterlein and I were among 8 newly elected senators that arrived to the state Senate in January of 2016. And so they seat us in order of seniority, and so I have the opportunity and good fortune of sitting next to him in both of those committees. And we look out for each other. We discuss votes frequently. And Dave, welcome to our live weekly town hall. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I'm very happy to be here today.
You know, Senator Suetterlein is one of my favorite people in the Senate, and I just have to tell you that up front. He's a man of integrity and character, which is very important to me. And because he's been a legislative aide before, he has such great insight on these bills, and I really do listen to him whenever we're sitting there on the floor, deciding how to vote on some of these issues that, most of them I've made my mind up on, but I always like to ask Senator Suetterlein because he has such great insight, and I find it very helpful. So, Dave, I have a list of all of the legislation that you were chief patron on, and I thought we would start first with talking about Senate Bill 1409, which has to do with reckless driving and raising the threshold for speeding. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about that bill?
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the opportunity to be on. The McDonnell administration raised the statewide speed limit to 70 miles an hour on interstates, which was a good thing that most Virginians supported, but they did not raise the reckless driving threshold, which remained 80 miles an hour, which means some folks find themselves going 11 miles over the limit, pulled over, and then they find out they just committed a Class 1 misdemeanor, which is a very serious offense, and they could face a $2,500 fine and or a year in jail, all for going 11 miles over the speed limit. And most folks aren't going to have those sorts of penalties applied to them for going 11 miles over, but the threat of such things often compels them to hire an attorney, which in their mind, it doesn't really matter if they're paying the state or an attorney. It's a significant penalty just for going 11 miles over the speed limit. So my bill sought to raise it to 85 so folks don't have to worry about that. That's especially a bigger issue for folks on your side of the state who might work for the federal government and have security clearances, and a Class 1 misdemeanor could, blow that away for them.
Yeah, that's not good. And I'm looking over the history of the bill right now, and it looks like it passed the Senate. And I know I voted in support of this bill. It passed the Senate 34-6, and then it went over to the House, and it failed to recommend reporting in a transportation subcommittee, so that's a little bit frustrating there. Any idea what happened? What was the opposition?
The insurance companies strongly oppose it, and they have a few different groups that they speak out, but it's essentially all the insurance groups at once speaking out against it. And there's also some attorneys who don't think that we should be they're weary of anything that reduces penalties. And we have the same debate over the felony threshold and if that should be increased because of inflation or not. And there's folks over there that just don't see it our way.
Right. I was even noticing, as far as the no's, surprisingly, Senator McDougal and Senator Obenshine voted against that. So that's interesting thing to note.
Yeah, we got it through the Senate on a pretty overwhelming vote. But yeah, the attorneys tend not to like it as much.
Well, I supported it. I think it was a good bill. Are you planning on reintroducing that next session?
Yeah, and I'm optimistic that we'll be able to get that in several of the bills to reform the criminal code. A lot of things that we have as crimes on the books that aren't really that high level of crime, but we're putting out significant penalties for. And I'm optimistic that a new governor might be able to help encourage some of that dialogue in the House of Delegates.
Yeah, that sounds great. We had a similar bill that came before us in transportation. I'm just searching back in my mind about there was the bill, and I believe this passed. The bill that basically, if you get in the left lane and you go too slow, you can be assessed. I think it started off $250, but the governor amended it to $100. Do you remember that bill?
Yeah, that was a bill that came from a delegate a little further west than me, Israel O'Quinn, and I thought it was a great bill. We have a lot of discussion about reckless driving, obviously, but also just distracted driving.
Mm-hmm.
And often people want to go after what they think causes distracted driving, but we don't know if it actually is. Whereas when people are driving in the left-hand lane slowly and they're creating a significant safety issue there with folks having to slam on their brakes just because they're going with the speed of traffic in the left lane, those folks are actually distracted driving, and we know that.
Mm-hmm.
And that legislation sought to address it, and I think it will be a good tool for the state police to use on our highways.
Now, that passed, but it passed with the governor's amendments, correct?
Right.
It lowered it to a $150 fine. So that'll go into effect July of this year.
July 1st, folks will need to make sure, so they should start doing that already, not driving slow in the left lane, because they could be fined for it going forward.
Senator Suetterlein going to be right back right after the 4-minute break, so stay tuned. We have more to come. Well, welcome back to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase and Senator Suetterlein from Roanoke, and we are so glad to have Senator Suetterlein here, my seatmate, one of my dear friends in the Senate. We are discussing a number of bills that came up in the Senate that I think you all as listeners should know and be aware of, and we were just talking about distracted driving, and I've been on the phone, Senator Suetterlein, yesterday with a gentleman who has been riding motorcycles since he was probably about 11 years old. And he commented to me, he was very concerned. He said, we need to do something about the amount of distracted driving, and that on a regular basis that people are swerving in his lanes. He said, I got so close to one lady, she was on her Facebook, that I could actually see she was on Facebook. And he said, it's a real scary place out there if you're a motorcycle driver. And, I cautioned him, and I said, a lot of times we run into issues and we immediately want to come up with some type of legislation to fix what's the problem. But I said, let's break this down for a minute to your point, what Senator Suetterlein was talking about before we went to a break. There was a bill out there that said, there would be a penalty if you're on your cell phone. But let's think about that. How would you enforce that? How would law enforcement enforce that? What about navigation? Some people use their phones to navigate, to get someplace. There are different situations, and it's really hard to decipher if the person is on Facebook or if they are texting. And then what's to distinguish that between somebody putting their makeup on? Are we going to outlaw people putting on makeup or eating while driving? It really does open up Pandora's box. And so I had to ask him, is that something that we want to do as liberty-minded people that don't want to be restrained? So, Dave, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that we already have legislation on the books that prohibits folks from texting while driving. We also have this new legislation going into effect July 1st. Says if you're in the left lane going too slow, you can get fined. And we also already have laws that say if you veer into another lane, that you can also be fined for that, for going in there when you don't have a clear path. So I think that a lot of folks would like to have laws that reduce distracted driving, but it's primarily an enforcement issue, and we already have several laws on the books with it. I don't support the legislation that tries to make it a primary offense to be talking on telephone, a handheld phone. I don't think that's the right path to go for Virginia, and that's where I am on the issue, and I think that's where most of our Senate transportation colleagues are too.
Yeah, you're exactly right on that. And just in case people are tuning in, this is Senator Amanda Chase, and I have Senator Dave Suetterlein from Roanoke on the phone. And one of the things that we talked about before the break is the importance, and start practicing now, though, because this is going to be the law effective July 1, is if you need to make sure that you're using that left lane to pass. So you predominantly want to stay in the right-hand lane, because if you get in that left lane and clog up that traffic and you cause an accident, it's no longer going to be acceptable. And there's going to be a financial penalty of $100 for doing that. So just FYI. Let's move on to another topic. You had Senate Bill 1411, and this had to do with the congressional and state legislative districts. And we've talked a lot on the show about redistricting and about the number of bills. We talked about the court cases that have come up from that Virginia 2021 has filed. And I supported this bill. I like this. I think it addresses some of the compactness issues and concerns. And Dave, let's talk a little bit about this Senate Bill 1410. Give folks a little summary about what it is and what it's designed to do.
Well, yeah, thanks. What this bill is designed to do is to create a mathematical standard by which the compactness of districts will be measured. And that way, instead of just saying districts are compact, which the current state constitution already requires that legislative districts be compact, but because there's no actual standard that it's measured against, it's not really a requirement at all. My district, which you read earlier, has 8 localities, but I only have 100% of 2 of them. The other 6 are all divided, and often the small towns in those counties are divided right down the middle for no good reason other than that was the political interest of those drawing the lines at the time. And I always like to make sure people know I wasn't there. I wasn't drawing those lines.
Right.
But with a compactness standard, we would actually be able to measure it. It's in the same way that for a long time the premise was districts should be of equal size, but there was no actual mathematical standard which we said the deviation from districts would be. And so there was a very wide variance of what was allowed. Now we're at the point, in the last redistricting, they said we're only going to have districts no more than plus or minus 2%. And because our districts have 200,000 people in it, that meant that the largest district by population couldn't have more than 8,000 people more than the least populated district. And I think that we need an actual mathematical standard. Unfortunately, it was a near party line vote, and the bill was defeated there. The year before, I actually got it through the Senate on a party line vote, but then it was defeated by the House Privileged and Elections Committee, which hasn't been very enthusiastic about taking up redistricting issues.
Yes, and hopefully, that's about to change. It's interesting. I was at a forum yesterday with other Greater Richmond area legislators, and the whole issue of redistricting came up. And there are just a couple comments that I know that I've already made on the show about the importance. I always talk about transparency, probably ad nauseum, but I do feel like that. There's this big talk about having independent commissions, and I really question, do you really want a bureaucrat appointed to draw these lines? I mean, I can tell you that anyone has the knowledge of redistricting and even what that is, and that's the drawing of the lines for the Senate districts, the legislative districts, the congressional districts. It's the drawing of those lines so that you know as a listener, who, as a constituent, who is my state senator, who's my congressman, and so forth. That's what we're talking about here. Those lines are drawn by the General Assembly, and if there's issues with them, then it goes to court, which is basically what happened. But it's corrected. Like, for instance, if you take a look at Congressman Randy Forbes' district, at District 4, it's now Don McEachin. They changed the lines. So it's not like the legislators have they can draw the lines any way they want. There's federal guidelines as well as far as a certain number of minorities that have to be in a district. And honestly, and Senator McClellan and I were discussing this yesterday, and she even said this. She said the black vote is determining the shape of a lot of these districts because you have to get a certain number and percentage of minorities in these districts, and that sometimes is why we're seeing these odd shapes. Now, we're going to be back in 15 seconds with Senator Suetterlein. We'll be back in 4 minutes. You're going to want to stay tuned. We have so much more to cover.
I will fight to the end. Doesn't matter what
Well, welcome back to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase and Senator Suetterlein, who is calling in by phone. And Senator Suetterlein, we have a caller on the phone. Joe from Smithfield has a question regarding our highways. Joe, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. You hear me okay?
Yes, sir. I love to hear your question.
I've been enjoying your show for a number of weeks and talking about all these legislation issues about about transportation and highways, reluctance of legislators to change certain things. I want to tell you, I was recently with my family taking my kid to a Saturday morning basketball game for Upward, and we were rear-ended on a 55-mile-an-hour highway near Smithfield, and the person just slammed right in the back of us. We were waiting for some traffic to clear ahead of us, and at highway speeds, they slammed in the rear of us. No skid marks, no brakes at all, and the woman got a broken arm, and we were all injured in our car, and our car was totaled. But get this. The state police that investigated, all they wanted to do was, and all they did do was cite her as following too closely. Now, we got 4 people that were injured, a car totaled, she was injured, her passenger was injured, and she's got basically what amounts to following too closely, which sounds like maybe you tailgated somebody, but you never made contact. And we've talked to the people about this charge, and we find that inadequate. And we go, what in the world? The state police didn't take any pictures. They made fun of me, and it's visible on the body camera video, made fun of me for asking them to collect the evidence off the road and off the back of my car to ensure that we could identify that the car actually was the one that hit us, because the person said there was another car that was in between and drove off. Some BS story made up to try to reduce their own liability. But, you know, I've never been rear-ended like this, but I'm very disappointed when our state police, all vaunted as they are, take an accident not very seriously and don't even charge people who could have killed us, and they were probably texting. And that's what it looks like, and they didn't bother to get the phone records or anything. And I want y'all to know this is what's going on with real people and real lives out here in our state.
Well, I hope you still have the police report, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so it has the officer's name on that, and
Yes, ma'am.
I have connections, just happen to have some connections at the state police, and so we'll follow up. And Sarah, do you have the ability to take him offline and get his information? Okay, Joe, if for some reason we get disconnected, I want you to call my office number here in case something happens. Hopefully not, but those things happen. Let me give you the best number to call here.
Yes.
Call 804-698-7511. Okay, that's my official office number. If we get disconnected for some reason, my aide, Julianne, will follow up with you. And, yeah, we just gave the state police a raise. So, you know, I know that they've had some personnel issues, and trying to retain people has been difficult in keeping the best people. So I do know of that. We've hopefully just fixed that issue with this past General Assembly session. The wage compression issues. I mean, but, you know, this is a problem, and I definitely want it addressed. And if we're not doing what we're supposed to do, then I'm glad you called in, so we'll follow up.
I would appreciate your help, and I'll be in touch.
Okay, very good. Well, Joe, thanks so much for calling. And Senator Suetterlein, are you still on the phone? Okay. We'll get Senator Suetterlein back on the phone here in just a second. Yeah, you know, I mean, I will just be completely honest with you. I have been to the state police headquarters numerous times, and the gentlemen there and the ladies that I met there are fine people. I would say that's probably the exception and not the rule, to have folks have that kind of situation to occur, and that's tragic and horrible, and we definitely don't want to have those types of situations. And you know, people mess up and they need to be held accountable, and so we're definitely going to follow up on that. Let me give Sarah, here is Senator Suetterlein's phone number if you want to try to call and get him back on. Okay. We're going to next talk about a bill that has to do with Senate Bill 1411. And this bill authorizes the use of consumer fireworks and the penalties associated with that. It authorizes the use of consumer fireworks in the Commonwealth and distinguishes, by definition, consumer fireworks from display fireworks and permissible fireworks. Now, we'll talk about this more July 1, but I know July 4th, coming up to July 4th and Independence Day. You know, a lot of people, I grew up in Alabama, and there we could have fireworks, and it wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, I was a kid. I don't maybe know the public safety concerns, and I really, when I was a kid, I just had fun and know enjoying what it's like to have the fireworks. But I also know that they're very dangerous. And so looks like we're going to be going to a break here in just a second. We're going to have Senator Suetterlein. He has introduced a statewide fire prevention code. And so, Senator Suetterlein, when we come back, we're going to have you talk about that bill. Stay tuned. This is State Senator Amanda Chase and State Senator David Suetterlein from Roanoke, and we are here today to answer your questions and to discuss some legislation which our listeners might find very interesting. Senate Bill 1411 is a bill that would attempt to legalize fireworks. Is that correct, Dave?
Yeah, that's exactly what it does.
Now, I like that bill. Some people, like I know a lot of our fire marshals and everything, had some concerns, but I grew up with fireworks. It's a liberty issue, right?
Well, I also think it's something that could help. It's an economic opportunity for a lot of folks. I think that my district has two interstates running through it. Part of it runs very close to the North Carolina line. And what you see is folks from other states that have legalized fireworks, they often have these businesses crop up near their borders because folks from further away in states where it's not legal go there and buy them. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to see, instead of having Virginia be customers in these other states, I'd like to have Virginians actually be able to have these businesses here in Virginia. And I think it could help create some opportunities for folks.
Right. And unfortunately, that bill was passed by indefinitely in a General Laws and Technology Senate committee. So I want to quickly go on to Senate Bill 1412, which I love this bill. In fact, I co-patroned it because I loved it so much. Myself and Senator Sturtevant. Senator Suetterlein is the chief patron of the bill, and we signed on as co-patrons. And this is a pro-life bill, which I love. It's an adoption bill. And I'm going to let you talk about it. I love it, but it's your bill. You're the chief patron, so tell us all about it.
Well, yeah, this bill, like the fireworks bill, both came from your former seatmates, mine, Tom Garrett, who's now in Congress representing part of the communities that I represent. He does so at the federal level. And we knew someone and that worked for the state, went to adopt a child, and she wasn't able to get maternity leave, even though it was a newborn. And if she had given birth to the child herself, she would have qualified for it. What my bill seeks to do is provide that benefit for our state employees that would then be able to enjoy maternity leave when they adopt. And it would also, for the first time, provide paternity leave for fathers if their birth child or an adopted child is a newborn. And we were careful to craft it so it was just newborns. I would like it to be much larger, but this way we'll be able to see what impact it has and how the state workforce can go forward from there.
Now, if I understand correctly, this bill passed and the governor signed it, but it became a JLARC study. So let's tell folks what a JLARC study is, and I know it goes into effect July 1st.
Yes. So what what I described as the policy goals of the bill, it's got a delayed enactment, so it wouldn't go into effect till 2018, unlike July of 2017. And also the General Assembly will have to revisit it next January after we have the benefit of a study by a group of policy experts and some of the senior members of the legislature that are in the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee. And it's very challenging to get them to review anything because when they do review something, it has a significant impact on the legislature. It often signals which direction we're going to go in. Mm-hmm. And I was really happy that they were willing to incorporate my adoption issue and the policy I'm trying to advance into a JLARC study. And I think it's going to be, I expect it's going to come back not as expensive as some folks suggest, and it will be a good thing for us to do for our state employees and help these children.
Absolutely. And it looks like, in looking at the history of the bill, that I don't see a single legislator that voted against this bill. So
No.
Definitely has potential. And I wish that we could have just signed it in law and been done with it, but, okay. At least we moved it in the ball in the right direction, and I'm happy to co-patron that again with you next year. Let's go on to Senate Bill 1583, which has to do with teacher licensure, career and technical education, and certain local waivers. Go ahead and tell our listening audience the summary of this bill.
Yeah, thanks. One of the things that we're trying to do in the legislature is try to do things to make more career and technical education available to young Virginians and help them acquire the skills that will help them become very desirable employees for existing companies, or give them the skills where they could be entrepreneurs and start their own service businesses there. What we have, though, is we often have a challenge getting the folks with these skills in the schools to teach. The skills that we want them to teach are ones that often result in very good personal income for them, and they're happy to serve in the schools, but they also want to continue running their businesses. And honestly, we want them to continue running their businesses and providing jobs in the community. So what my bill did was it said local school divisions can provide waivers for folks that have these special skills that want to come in and teach, but don't necessarily want to become a full-time teacher and go through the process of going through all the bureaucratic hoops that licensure requires. And the goal is that we'll be able to get these folks in some communities where it's hard to get these folks, and then they'll be able to teach a few classes while continuing to run their own businesses, and just give another tool to our local school divisions to get these folks in.
Now, the good news, this is passed, correct?
Yes, it passed. It had some challenges in the House of Delegates the first time. It passed overwhelmingly because there was a Republican majority there, but the Democrats almost uniformly voted against it because the teachers union opposed it. In the end, though, when it was clear the governor was going to support it, and he sent down a technical amendment, they were then able to use that as justification for them voting for it. And so we were able to get it as a unanimous bill in the very end.
That's fantastic. We don't have much time yet left, but I want you to talk about Senate Bill 1584, which is a high school graduation bill. We've got like 1 minute. Tell us all about the high school graduation requirements.
On which one?
This requires the Board of Education in establishing high school graduation requirements to provide for the award of verified units of credit for satisfactory scores on locally selected, nationally recognized.
I know we put in. The short version on that is instead of kids taking redundant SOL tests after they've already done great on the SATs or PSATs, we won't make them do it again, and we'll use that as the verified credit score, and then they can go on and acquire greater skills in higher level classes, and allow the teachers to help the kids that still need help on those skills develop them, instead of having redundant testing. That's what that bill's all about.
That makes sense. Well, if you stay tuned, can you stick around for our next segment, Senator Suetterlein?
That'd be great.
Okay, y'all stay tuned. We'll be back in 4 more minutes. Well, it's time for the final wrap-up of Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase and Senator Suetterlein today, and we're going to finish talking about Senate Bill 1585 is the bill I want to talk about. It has to do with party identification of candidates. It is a bill that Senator Suetterlein introduced. I supported it, and I'm going to give you the opportunity, Senator Suetterlein, to tell the folks about your bill. Tell us about it.
Thanks. So what this bill does is it simply says that when Republicans or Democrats run for public office in Virginia, in offices that have already been declared partisan offices, and ones where you can actually run in a Republican or Democratic primary, that you'll actually be identified as such on the ballot. Right now, that only goes from the House of Delegates up. So I know Chesterfield County, for example, has had contested primaries for supervisor and other local offices that taxpayers have had to pay for, but then when they go to vote, they don't see it on the ballot who actually won the nomination as a Republican or Democrat. I think it's a simple transparency issue.
There's that
and
key
it's something
word.
That's right. It's passed the Senate on bipartisan votes the last 2 years, but then it's gotten caught up 1 year in the House of Delegates on the floor, and the other year the governor vetoed it outright.
Yeah, I was looking at the history, and as you said, it passed the Senate on a 23-17, so it sounds like a party line vote there. And in the House, it seems to get hung up in privileges and elections. Like it was defeated. It actually went to the floor of the House. It was a 46-54 no vote, and mostly partisan. I mean, most Republicans support it. There were few who did not. What was their big hang up? Seems like a no-brainer to me. Why wouldn't we want to have more transparency?
Yeah, I mean, that was the worst thing. One of the folks who voted against it and spoke against it said we don't want to have more partisanship in these local offices after he had just run in the Democratic primary for mayor just a few years ago. Another reason why I think this bill is good is you often see in local offices, there tends to be, because it's not on the ballot, other campaigns come up with phony sample ballots that try to claim that an independent is actually on a certain party ballot, either to help their own candidacy or to hurt an opponent if they think that the other party's not popular in their community. If you actually put it on the ballot, that way everyone will know if they're actually Republicans, Democrats, or independents. And I just think that's only fair.
Well, I love the bill so much, I'm willing to be a patron on it next go around if you bring it up next year. I think it's a great issue for the Transparency Caucus to get behind you on this. We got 30 seconds to the break. Senator Suetterlein, thanks so much for coming on the show and your time today. I know how busy you are, and go sell some houses. I hope you are prosperous for the rest of your day, and we just appreciate you so much. I love having Senator Suetterlein as my seatmate, and look forward to having him back on the show in the future. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
All right. So you all will need to tune in next week. We're going to have Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. And my goal, I'm going to start having a senator on, different senator around the state every week.